I recently posted a Deltarune chapters 1 through 4 boss ranking. I remember being so worried while making it because I thought it was going to underperform due to the fact that I was getting it out late after the chapters had been released. Yeah, turns out I didn't have to worry about that because Jesus Christ. Once again, I thank you all so much for the support on that video, especially if you had a good time watching it. It's one of my favourite videos I've ever made, so if you've seen it, I do hope you got something out of it. But the success of it got me thinking that I should probably make some more Deltarune content, purely for internet fame and not for the love of the craft. But seriously, I may as well ride this hype train for a little bit longer before getting back into horror and all of that kind of jazz. But with that in mind, there was one aspect of the 2 chapters that I wanted to make a video for anyway, and that, of course, is the Shadow Mantle route. The Shadow Mantle route is kind of the way of unlocking the secret boss in Chapter 3. As you probably already know, Chapter 3 is weird with its secret boss because it's not really a secret. It's accessible and even beatable without unlocking anything new. However, the Shadow Mantle route allows you to get the Shadow Mantle, which turns the battle from excruciating to just plain old very difficult. This is also kind of a secret boss route because it ties into the 3 main secret entities that have the elements of your standard secret boss. The Knight, which is the actual battle, Eram, which is an optional encounter, and Eram, who has that theme of freedom and was probably supposed to get the crystal, but that's a completely different conversation. Essentially, the route to get the Shadow Mantle is the closest thing to being a secret boss route without actually being one. And I wanted to make a video on it because I think it's really good. It not only has some really fantastic horror elements that makes an experience unique and yet on brand for Deltarune, but it also gets across a whole bunch of really enticing lore in a mysterious way that's great for theorizing. So let's get straight into it. While Board 1 is definitely the least interesting of the 3, it has a lot of subtle things that make it a very unique experience and, if nothing else, a great introduction to the route. To complete the board, what you have to do is find this sword, kill enough enemies to get to level 3, find the secret tunnel, get to the max level, and go so off track that you find the ice key. This one is definitely less in your face lore heavy than the other ones, but the clues it has and what it sets up are incredibly important. Now might be a good time to mention the Snowgrave route, or Weird route. Nah, Snowgrave sounds 10 times better. I don't think it's hard to see, like this commenter on Glacier said, that this route is the way that new players are supposed to organically learn about the Snowgrave route. It has a bunch of references to it, both with the gameplay and quotes, and has direct hints about what you're supposed to do to unlock it. While yes, this is much more prevalent in the second board, this one does play into it a little. This room, where it tells you to become stronger, referencing how Noelle becomes stronger after each kill. Interestingly, once you get to level 3, it says that you became stronger. It makes me wonder if Noelle's abilities in Dark Worlds have a cap, or if we're kind of working her towards a specific threshold. But other than that, I think the main reason this works as a fear-inducing section of the game is the sudden and almost palpable isolation. Chapter 3 is a very light-hearted and guided chapter for 95% of it. You pretty much always have Tenna guiding you, pretty much everyone in the Dark World wants to help you out, and up until you get to that point with Toria on the Snow Globe, which is after Board 2, there isn't really a sense of any threat. Honestly, most people first playing this chapter would probably forget about all the other mysteries from the end of Chapter 2 and the darker tone that goes along with them. But the secret route reintroduces these elements in a very subtle, good way, and this is mostly done through being all alone. The boards that previously had upbeat music and Tenna making constant one-liners to cut out the boredom are now barren of anything human. The 3 boards are pretty much all about what you and Kris are both planning, and I love how this is always presented as something no one else can know about. Something I wanted to mention in the chapters 3 and 4 review is that making Susie pretty much the main character of the game has, in my opinion, made everything with Kris and Rousey so much more engaging. It feels like you're part of something bubbling underneath the surface that'll eventually come to completely break apart what's supposed to be happening. In fact, in a lot of ways, these boards feel like a counter-prophecy. The real one, the one Rousey's memorized, involves the main path. But this one is like a harbinger of the Snowgrave route and the Mystery Man, something that can stop what's destined to happen. But I'm getting a bit ahead of myself here. Back to board number 1. Yeah, the total isolation is really effective and it's a large reason why I like this route so much. So what else do we have? I like the reveal of this sword, and when you realize you have to kill these things, it's pretty goddamn disturbing. The way you go off track by breaking apart all these trees feels super liminal and adds a ton to the vibe of the whole thing. The combat system isn't too annoying at this point in the route since the enemies are all very simple and a lot are pretty fun to go up against. Also, while I didn't pick this up on first playthrough, there are a lot of hints to something else being inside of the game with you. Hidden messages about seeing you soon, something running out behind you as you enter this secret room. This is probably not going to be important later. Generally though, this board had to set up the idea of a creepy secret route to the game, and it does that really well without actually going too deep into the lore and whatnot. But speaking of lore and whatnot, Board 2 is the Snowgrave board, essentially. It mentions the existence of another route and has some cryptic messages explaining how to get it. Essentially, this board is very similar to the first, killing enemies, going out of bounds, up until you get to this Northern Light. You open it with the ice key from the previous board and you get sent to this secret area where you use this ice mage, Noel, to navigate your way through and level up. At the end, you end up in this dark room where a mysterious voice speaks to you. So in terms of the good horror, I'll quickly go through the first part of this board, which is way less interesting than everything at Northern Light. It's very similar to the first, but that isn't too bad because the first was so creepy. I like how the music starts off pitched down, but then cuts off way sooner than it did in the previous board. In fact, while the music throughout the secret route certainly isn't as fun to listen to as the standard soundtrack, I'm surprised to say that I kind of love a fair bit of it. It has a super dark and creepy vibe, and perfectly sets the tone when things start going downhill. My personal favourite is Glacier, the one in the Northern Light area. It's so disturbing by doing very little. Anyways, the out of bounds part in this one is also pretty great, the enemies are all pretty good, it's basically just the same as before. The only notable secret I can think of is this room, where we get to see in-game Tenet talking to himself. He says that he's worried about Kris and co not liking the game, and how strange stuff keeps showing through. He then mentions how we should have never based it off this old thing, referring to the secret route machine. This reminds me of how I need to mention that what we're using now is the original machine. This of course prompts the question, where did this machine come from? It obviously holds a lot of relevance to the Shadow Mantle, Bunker and Kris, but it probably wasn't put here by the Knight because we were the ones that made the fountain. Don't get me wrong, it's possible that the Knight somehow summoned it with an item they had, but I kind of prefer the idea that this thing came into fruition from something else. Maybe Kris, when they made the fountain, was focused so heavily on not giving anything away about the greater plot, that they accidentally willed the key of their entire plan into the Dark World, kind of like how Susie brought back the evil and intimidating Gerson rather than the one she wanted in Chapter 4. Or maybe some other creature like Friend or Carol who's in league with Kris and the Knight brought it in. I don't know, I find it very interesting, but I can get into more of that tenor stuff at Board 3. Now it's time for Northern Light. This is probably the most disturbing part of the route for me. It slowly dawns on you just how connected to the Snowgrave this route is, and the simplistic art designs and storytelling is really engaging. The main thing that makes me remember this section more than any other in the route are all of the quotes. The forbidden path began with ice magic, follow the white cloak. They're all just so foreboding, and I adore how well they get across the feeling that this route is supposed to give you. Obviously though, I have to give a special mention to the lines, "She was used up," and "You were used up." God, full body chills reading those things. This part makes me more excited about what's going to happen later in the game than anything else. How is Noelle going to get used up? Once she's done fulfilling the purpose that we seem to be inadvertently helping with, what's going to happen to her? And what about us? When it says "you were used up," is it referring to us or Kris? Either way, it's horrific for a myriad of reasons. Personally, I think there's the three main plot lines. The main prophecy, which Susie, Rousey and us are going to have to try and rewrite to save the world with as minimal damage as possible. The counter prophecy, where the bunker people, which we can assume is the Knight, Des, Carol, Kris, Gaster, Friend and possibly some others, are trying to make their own story. Then there's the Snowgrave route, which is us as the player creating a plot line for ourselves, which Kris is clearly opposed to and we can assume probably doesn't fall in line with the prophecy. And this used up line seems to come into conjunction with the Snowgrave route, which could easily mean a whole lot of death at the end of this route, which is just, yeah, that's fantastic. Anyways, the other main thing I like about this port is how it portrays just how much you're using Noelle. Just so you know, I'm calling White Cloak Noelle because, I mean, come on. In the actual route, you tell her to do terrible things and clearly hold an immense amount of power over her, but that total control isn't as clear or palpable as it is in this game. In the Mantle route, you have to literally stab her to make her join you. Whenever you get her to kill something, you have to swing the knife yourself. In this maze section, you quite literally use her as an object to find your way through. I think that this was a great choice. So far, each of the chapters have added a little extra something to the Snowgrave route. Chapter 2 introduced the route, Chapter 3 goes into the future of the route and serves as a tutorial for newer players, and Chapter 4 goes into the light world implications of the route, alongside Kris's very passionate feelings on the matter. I reckon that of all of these, despite the intense drama and emotion in 2 and 4, Chapter 3 portrays this in my favourite way. It is so disturbing and dives super well into how much of a monster you are for abusing this power that you have over her. All of this Snowgrave simulator ends with you finding this room, using up the White Cloak. Inside this room, this mysterious voice speaks to you again, and when you find the shelter key, it seems very pleased. After this, it says that you were used up and the board ends. I'll be talking about this mysterious voice a fair bit more in board 3, but for now just think about their relation to you. They seem to be egging you on, getting you to find the keys, saying that you fulfilled your purpose, and you get discarded just like Noelle does. It definitely seems to find you amusing at the very least. I think we can assume that it knows about how you and Kris are separate, and I think it's talking to Kris rather than you here, but either way it's definitely one of the most unknown and mysterious aspects of the game. But more on that later. The last thing I could say about this board would be that I like the dark colour scheme of Northern Light and how it's so different from the bright beach area beforehand. These puzzles with the enemies are also pretty cool and I like them for it. Yeah, just a generally well executed dark turn for the route which opens a ton of interesting questions. But now we move on to... Board 3 is probably the most packed board out of any of these. There isn't a moment that isn't dripping with some kind of important lore reveal. That makes it hard to condense for the purposes of this video, but I'll just have to see what I can do because I could talk about this stuff for probably an hour straight. In board 3, you start off in a version of the cyberworld with Susie and Rousey following you.
Important thing to note, I just realized that the first part of board 3 isn't actually the cyberworld, it's the TV city, but there are enough design similarities that I think we can call them similar, plus it kind of ties into a theory that I have going on. Okay, thank you, bye.
Once you get the sword, you have to murder them both to get to level 3 and progress into the next section. This area has a whole bunch of enemies, and once you defeat them all, you can progress even further. From there, you follow Tanner down this hallway where he talks about his dealings with this unnamed big shot, before you have to murder him to get past as well. After this, you make it to the bunker, which Kris does not want to go inside, and meet the strange voice. It reveals itself to be the holder of the Shadow Mantle before starting a boss fight. After defeating the... oh, damn it. After getting past a... God damn, that's... after winning the... After this battle, the mantle holder offers you the mantle after making some more comments about Kris and their lovely red eyes. Then there's a little bit after, which I'll go into separately. This board covers a lot of things. It covers the potential fate of Susie and Rousey, Tanner's history with Spamton, the mantle holder, Kris's connection to the bunker, the importance of the cyberworlds and the Snowgrave route. And while all of this on its own would be enough to make it a well worthwhile part of the route, the execution of a lot of these things is great as well. To begin with, the cyberworld. Once again, you're sent to a completely empty board. Susie and Rousey are there, sure, but this time there's no enemies, creating this intensely still and unbreakably quiet atmosphere. This is arguably even more effective on this board because of the fact that the cyberworld is a known location, a location bursting with life in the previous chapter. It's immediately apparent where you are, and it creates a very unique atmosphere when compared to the introduction of the previous two. The only other thing I can bring up about this section is the part where you kill Susie and Rousey. Obviously, how can I not? You guys know why this is here. God, this part is unnerving. I love how it doesn't exaggerate or build up the intensity of killing the two. Most likely you'll just kill one on accident and realize that you have to do the same to the other. I think it's a good continuation of that idea of how cold-hearted you are in the Snowgrave route, and how you have to be able to kill whatever you need to with great ease. It's a great omen for future chapters. Also, making Kris flinch at these points was a great detail to add. Anyways, moving on to this section now. I'll be frank, I didn't really enjoy this section, but that's mainly because I'm not used to this style of gameplay, so I'll leave that be. I think that the visuals in this set of rooms is actually pretty great. Despite its simplicity, it's really creepy and also shockingly iconic. It's the kind of room design that makes me feel like I've seen it before, in a good way. There's also a lot of parallels to the real world. For example, this horned enemy that uses tridents surrounded by 7 flowers, obviously being a reference to Asgore. There's also this room where when you do some digging into the code, you'll find that this entity is called a deer. This is probably a very interesting reference to Des. Also this room with an armored fish that's probably a reference to Undyne, and a bunch of yellow lizards who spontaneously die right after you kill it. Oh, that's dark. But there's a bunch of interesting and hidden references in this section, which sucks because they all involve death and murder. That's making me terrified and depressed, so let's move on to Tanner. While the Tanner section yet again doesn't have much to analyze in the ways of getting across horror, it does have plenty to get across in the way of lore. Unlike any other moment in the route that mostly hints towards a greater narrative, this one gives you a full-blown Wikipedia plot breakdown of what happened between Tanner and Spamton. While yes, this could all be pretty much inferred from what Spamton says in chapter 2, it is great to get at least some form of closure on this plotline. It might come back later, but even if it doesn't, this is definitely a step up from the questions that were left a little up in the air with something like Jevil, you know? Tender talks about how he coerced the information out of Spamton on how to be a big shot, but Spamton got a call and left in a hurry. I always saw people interpreting Spamton's Chapter 2 ramblings as being about not getting a call, so it's funny to see the opposite. I also like to think that the call that Spamton got was from the Knight or someone in their league, luring him away into this desperate search for freedom the same way they locked up Jevil. I think that this mostly makes sense, though I'm no Deltarune theory expert. Anyways, after he's finished, he says some very interesting things about a deal he made with Kris. I did what you asked, don't turn me off, that kind of thing. I think it's referencing something about the Knight and Kris's plan in Chapter 3, but that's something I'll get back to at the end of the video. Just like Susie and Rousey, I like there's almost no build up to the point where you kill him. It makes the realization of what you're going to do even more effective. After this, you start heading into the bunker, and as you get closer, Kris tries to stop you. This board does a lot of reminding you that you and Kris are separate entities, so this last ditch effort by them is really cool to see. It's interesting to see Kris get more and more autonomy as the chapters go on. In Chapter 1, it was a minute-long epilogue cutscene. In Chapter 2, it was a 5-minute-long epilogue cutscene. In Chapter 3, they're doing some things during the adventure itself. In Chapter 4, they break out extensively on multiple occasions. This moment in particular is really interesting for the greater plan that they have going on. It's so necessary for you not to see what they have brewing up in there that they'll literally will themselves out of possession to attempt to stop you. It's just really cool and a great way to build stakes right before the final battle. Speaking of which, once you get in the shelter, the mysterious voice speaks to you once more, or speaks to Kris. Like I said, I'm pretty sure that it's speaking with Kris and not you for a few reasons. First off, it's in the bunker, therefore working with Kris more so than the soul. In the Snowgrave route, it makes references to how you enjoyed that killing and how you could say that it wasn't your fault. I reckon this makes more sense if it's talking about Kris being puppeted by the soul, because we sure as hell aren't blaming Kris for what we're doing. Anyways, this guy's really interesting. Its name is the Shadow Mantle holder, Eram, or, if you're really cool, John Mantle. Like I've said, it's clearly in leagues with Kris, but it also seems to be amused by their discomfort. It jokes about them making a sour face, it laughs at their fear. It's possible that the mantle holder is just Gaster or something, but due to its design, I'd say it's more likely just a completely new character. It also teases them and us throughout the battle, forcing us to kill and attack it and forcing Kris to enjoy it. It clearly wants Kris to be as violent as possible, and when leaving says that they both have work to do. I think it's an interesting dynamic, and I have no idea where it's going to go in the future. Anyways, with that out of the way, we now make our way to the final... Look, I've made my opinion on Eram pretty clear. It's very impressive, it has a unique idea and executes it very faithfully. With that said, I find it to be one of the most unfun battles in the entire game. I honestly don't even particularly know why I placed it as high as I did in the boss ranking, which I remind you is 25th out of 31, because I really just hate playing it. One thing I didn't even get to mention there is that I don't like how it breaks the vibe of the other boards. The previous moments in the route were so good at getting across this suffocatingly isolating and heartless atmosphere with surprisingly effective soundtrack and dark, borderline horrific storytelling, and this busts in with such a teasing basic feel and everything is pretty much ruined. Burning Eyes is one of my least favourite tracks in the game, purely because it just doesn't fit in with everything else the route was trying to be. Sure, you can argue that to portray John Mantle in any other way would be mischaracterizing him, but then put him somewhere else. It's not worth keeping him here. Anyways, rant over. Now we move on to whatever the hell's after the final boss. Honestly, I didn't want to harp on this section too much. This is one of the things that Pastor and many other theorists have really dug into, so I don't think I can bring a whole lot that's new. I'll focus more on the horror elements used. After the battle, you head up into the new pathway, where the chest containing the mantle is behind a wall just in case you didn't hate J. Jonah Mantle enough already. After this enough, you walk out of the screen and towards Kris, who is understandably horrified. You attack them, then waltz off screen, you can control real-world Kris again. You then head into the TV screen and collect the mantle before Susie comes back to check on you. This whole section is really interesting in my eyes. While I personally find the elements in Board 2 to be even more horrific, I completely get why anyone would find more terror in the completely unexpected way things turn out here. There really are no more boundaries, no more protective measures, and absolutely no more deciphering after your avatar leaves and Kris goes in. The way that Kris backs away in fear with seeming ease is also really interesting, because it seems like we're only controlling the avatar and not them by that point. With what Eram says about Kris enjoying the Snowgrave route and what's causing them to do it, this encounter could be a way for Kris to look their demon in the eye and realize how completely messed up this whole situation is. Sure, we don't know what this whole situation is right now, but that doesn't negate the shock that comes from this entire moment. In fact, once you get back on the console and Susie walks in, if you press up, the creature comes back and almost kills Susie. That was a real shocker when I first learnt about it, and Kris ripping her away was simultaneously wholesome and disturbing as hell. I'm so excited to see how this plotline affects the prophecy and Susie and everything. It's going to be awesome. But yeah, that's mostly it. After this, you get the Shadow Mantle and can defeat the knight after pain and suffering, as opposed to pain, suffering, and bloodshed. This Shadow Mantle route is just really good at creating a spooky and creepypasta-like atmosphere, while also having a lot of interesting lore reveals. While other elements of Chapter 3 are definitely more fun, this has got to be one of my favourite parts purely out of the fantastic execution. But hey, I did a lot of talking about everyone in the bunker's future plans, didn't I? How about we go into their current plans? This goes slightly off track from the Mantle route, but I think it ties into everything it has going on about whatever they're cooking up in the bunker. I understand that I made a few people pretty annoyed in my recent Deltarune videos, but the only part of it that I really want to apologise for is what I said about the knight's build-up. I said that there weren't really any hints about the knight being present in Chapter 3, and that was my main gripe with the encounter and ending. Well, I did not take into account Tenna's phone calls, which we can assume were with the knight. I didn't first consider these because I thought they were pretty bad at subconsciously preparing you for the knight introduction, something I still stand by. However, in retrospect, they probably weren't introduced for people's first playthrough. They were more likely included for seconds and thirds and all that. Because looking back, the trap that the knight cooks up for us is actually super compelling. I think that it's more compelling right now while we don't know exactly what its motives are. They clearly want to capture the Fun Gang, Toriel and Undyne. Kris put the plan into motion with the aforementioned deal they made, and called Tenna to keep Rousey, Susie and the Soul in the world until the knight got there, who was the person on the phone that he was getting angry at for being late. However, this plan fell apart when Tenna went on the Fun Gang side and decided to give them back Toriel. I'm assuming that the knight hadn't come yet because they were waiting for Undyne, but knew they had to step in once the gang had almost sealed the fountain. Now battle ensues, they get swooned, the knight attempts to capture Toriel and continue leading the gang around, but right as its plan is about to crumble, Undyne appears. This causes it to ignore everything else and simply kidnap her for some greater purpose in their plan that we don't know yet. I really just did not care to look at this beforehand, which really sucks because it's kind of super awesome. It makes the whole story of Chapter 3, my previous biggest issue of the chapter, turn into something super cool and mysterious and interesting to think about and piece together into the greater narrative. I wouldn't have really realised this at all without the Mantle route and all of its hints towards the Unfun Gang, and I really appreciate how this chapter does offer a lot more than it lets on during the first playthrough. Also, this is kind of unrelated, but I might have a theory as to why I didn't really like the knight encounter on regular playthroughs. See, when I first went through Chapter 3, I didn't do it all in one go, and I had to stop playing for whatever reason pretty soon after beating Tenna, so I was looking for a good place to leave things. As soon as I saw Tenna get no-scoped and the camera panned to this figure, I was like, ooh, a cliffhanger, perfect. I turned off the game as soon as I saw that text, the Roaring Knight appeared, and I think I only booted up the game again hours later. So I had that encounter mulling over in my head for ages before going into it, rather than the intended experience which was being thrown straight into a battle with them with zero preparation. I think that made me hope for more with the encounter and was part of why I was so disappointed and you guys weren't. I completely forgot about that when writing both the Deltarune review and ranking scripts, and for that I'm sorry. I'm also going to formally apologise to Chapter 3. I enjoy it way more now, even if I still think it's probably the weakest chapter. And by that I mean I'd probably give it like a very high 7 out of 10 nowadays. But that's mostly it. I think the Shadow Mantle route is absolutely awesome, and I think Chapter 3 is awesome, and the same with all of Deltarune, it's shaping up to be really great. I'll probably keep making some Deltarune content in between now and future chapters, but I've honestly been wanting to dive into analog horror for a while now, so that's definitely up next. But anyways, if you've made it this far, consider dropping a like and a sub if you really enjoyed it. Thanks for watching, it's okay to take too long, and cue the outro music.